I am the adopted daughter of the Law family. The Law family's twin brothers have pampered me since childhood, always showering me with love and fighting over who would marry me when I grew up. But later, when Naomi and I were both kidnapped and the kidnappers said they could only save one of us, they didn't hesitate to push me out. As long as Naomi is safe, you can do whatever you want with Lara. Lara, you're tough. You can take this. But Naomi is delicate. She can't handle even the slightest harm. They abandoned me, trading my life for Naomi's. I was covered in wounds and used all my strength to escape. The first thing I did was call my foster father. I'm willing to accept the marriage alliance with the Koo family. Chapter 1. When I crawled back to the Law family's home, my hands and feet were all ruined. My heart was filled with hope. But when I saw the Law brothers leisurely sitting on the sofa, massaging Naomi's legs, it shattered into pieces. While I was struggling for my life, not one of them cared about whether I lived or died. I stood at the door for a long time, and finally, James noticed me. He lifted his chin and gave a strange smile. See? I told you she'd be back within 24 hours. She's always been clever, full of tricks. Outwitting kidnappers is like a game for her. Claude, I won the bet. Your sports car is mine now. They were twins. Claude was the older brother, James the younger. Claude groaned in frustration. Damn, I should have never bet with you. I thought she'd take longer. I didn't expect her back this quickly. I was so angry my voice was shaking. Why didn't you save me? I was tortured by the kidnappers for a whole day. They beat me until my body was covered in wounds. And if I hadn't stolen the key by chance, I would have probably died. At that moment, Naomi, lying on the sofa, suddenly coughed. The brothers immediately looked concerned, leaning down to offer her tea. James suddenly glared at me. This is all your fault, Lara. You knew Naomi's health wasn't good, yet you took her out, causing her to catch a cold and hurt her leg. Claude added, if her health worsens, I won't let you off. I didn't understand what they were saying. It was her who insisted on dragging me out to see a fireworks show. It turned out to be a remote place, and as soon as we arrived, we were kidnapped. I was the victim here. Why is everyone blaming me instead? It wasn't me who took her out. It was her. I gasped for breath, pain shooting through my chest as I spoke. Naomi suddenly interrupted, sitting up weakly from the sofa, holding each of the brothers' hands tightly. Her pale face was on the verge of tears, looking utterly aggrieved. Don't blame Lara. It's all my fault. I grew up without anyone to care for me. Never had enough to eat. My body was too weak to escape, and that's why she suffered with me. It's all my fault. Don't scold her. Scold me instead. Her tears instantly softened the brothers, and they rushed to wipe them away. Naomi, you're so good. How could it be your fault? We know you have a kind heart, but stop defending Lara. We know her well. She's always been selfish, never thinking about others. All she's suffered today, she deserves it. But Naomi, you're different. You're kind and pure. You deserve the best. Every word they spoke made my heart freeze a little more. How did this happen? They used to love me so much. Since the day I was adopted into the Law family, they treated me with the utmost care, pampering me as if I were a precious treasure. Whatever I wanted, I would have by the next day. They argued over who would marry me when we grew up, even fighting over it more than once, until Naomi, the second adopted daughter of the Law family, moved in. At first, they didn't like her at all. I had to persuade them for a long time, telling them about Naomi's good qualities every day, taking her everywhere with me, doing everything I could to make them accept her. Eventually, they did, but all the love they once gave me was now directed entirely at her, and their attitude toward me changed completely. It felt as if I didn't even know them anymore. Chapter 2. I hobbled back to my room, kneeling by the bed, using my blood-stained hands to dial Mr. Law's number. Father, regarding the marriage alliance you mentioned before, I've agreed to it. Mr. Law was very busy and rarely involved with family matters. He was a thorough businessman, and the reason he adopted daughters was for profit. Good girl. That's the right decision. After the marriage alliance with the Koo family, I'll give you a generous dowry. You'll never have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of your life. Food and clothing for a lifetime. That's enough. I really wanted to escape as quickly as possible, never wanting to see the three of them again. It took me over an hour to clean off all the blood, and the wounds stung painfully as water touched them. That night, I was haunted by nightmares. The images repeated over and over, Law family's brothers pushing me toward the kidnappers without hesitation, using my life to exchange for Naomi's. They said I had tough skin, while Naomi was delicate. So, they didn't save me, instead carefully holding Naomi in their arms and leaving, not even letting her clothes get dirty. And I suffered round after round of torture. In the middle of the night, I felt a sharp pain in my chest, and I collapsed by the bed, coughing up blood. I dialed 120 and struggled to put on clothes before slowly going downstairs. Just as I reached the staircase, Naomi's voice came from behind. "Lara, where are you going at this hour?" She was like a ghost, silent and sneaky. I didn't want to answer her, just continued walking. She laughed behind me. "Are you sure you're not going to talk to me?" The next second, she forcefully grabbed my hand and screamed, "Help! Help!" The doors to the Law brothers' room opened simultaneously. As they rushed out, Naomi swapped positions with me, pulling me down the stairs. I lost my balance and tumbled down the stairs, the pain making me sweat as I struggled to get up, spitting out blood with each breath. Meanwhile, Naomi was safely caught by James, who had arrived in time. Naomi cried dramatically, "James, my foot. I think it's sprained. It hurts so much." Claude immediately knelt down on the floor, rubbing her foot. With each rub, Naomi cried out, "It really hurts. Claude, stop, please." The Law brothers were furious. Claude dashed down the stairs and without hesitation, kicked me in the stomach. "You evil woman. What did Naomi do to you for you to hurt her like this?" James, still holding Naomi, sneered, "So jealous. People like you deserve to die." I was curled up on the ground from the kick, my body shaking, unable to say a word. The sound of the ambulance was heard outside. I barely regained consciousness, clutching the carpet, trying to push myself up, but James stepped on my hand. Blood immediately oozed from the wound on my hand. I hoarsely begged, "Please, let me go. Please." James' voice was cold and heartless. "What right do you have to take the ambulance? If you're so capable, crawl to the hospital yourself." After saying that, they left, carrying Naomi out with them. The sound of the ambulance grew distant as I lost consciousness once again. Chapter 3. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital. The housekeeper who came to work in the morning had found me. 2 of my ribs were broken, and I had numerous other injuries. The doctor said that one of my ribs nearly punctured my heart. If it had been just a little worse, I would have never opened my eyes again. "Young lady, what's your family's phone number? I can help you call them." "You're too weak. You'll need someone to take care of you." The nurse spoke kindly. I forced a weak smile. "Thank you, but no need. I don't have any family." I thought that the best family I had, just a while ago, had watched me die and even cursed me to die. I closed my eyes in exhaustion. Another nurse came in, gossiping in a low voice. "Hey, I just saw a pair of extremely handsome twins in the next room." I almost couldn't resist asking for their contact info. "Why didn't you?" "Tisk. They're probably not single. They're protecting this girl so tightly, even feeding her bite by bite." I told them her foot was fine, and they still gave me a dirty look. Hearing this, my heart couldn't help but ache. Why is it that she can so easily take everything from me as soon as she appears? After 4 bags, I was finally able to get up and go to the bathroom. My bladder had been full for so long that it hurt, but I couldn't walk fast, so I had to move slowly. As soon as I reached the bathroom door, I looked up and saw the Law brothers standing there, one on each side, like guards. I tried to walk around them, but Claude stopped me with his hand. "Are you blind or mute? Can't you even greet us?" How rude. No matter how much Law family tries to teach you, it's useless. You're just a waste. James, standing beside him, crossed his arms and laughed. "What did you expect? That she'd be as clever as Naomi?" Claude sneered. "Don't compare her to Naomi. She's not worthy." I clenched my fists and gritted my teeth. Are you done talking? My stomach was in so much pain that I didn't have the energy to argue with them. If you're done, then move. Are you not embarrassed standing here at the women's bathroom? I swiped Claude's hand away and covered my stomach as I tried to walk in, but James cruelly stuck out his foot. I didn't see it in time and tripped, crashing onto the cold, hard floor. Ah! The sharp pain in my chest and stomach made me cry out, tears flooding down my face. I was like a stranded fish, helplessly struggling on the ground. James' mocking laughter came from behind me. Oh, pretending to be hurt? You should just stay on the ground if you're so capable. Just then, Naomi came out of the bathroom. She walked up to me with a superior air, and as she reached me, she threw water from her hands all over my hair. Ah, Lara, what are you doing on the floor? Do you need my help? As soon as she came out, the two brothers seemed like dogs seeing a bone, immediately rushing to her side. Claude scooped her up in his arms. Let her act. Naomi, don't waste your time with her. She's too scheming. You're so pure. You can't win against her. James asked with fake concern. Naomi, does your foot still hurt? Naomi acted cute. It still hurts so much. Can you rub it for me? I heard that helps it heal faster. The Law brothers were all smiles, fighting over who would rub her feet. They were flirting, while no one cared about me. Lying on the floor in pain, I thought I was going to die, my whole body trembling, until the nurse who was giving me N4 came over, anxiously lifting me from the ground. I tasted blood in my throat again and coughed it up. Chapter 4. The nurse hurriedly called for help. Claude glanced down briefly and said to the nurse, "Are you a doctor? What kind of vision do you have? Can't you tell she's faking it?" The nurse angrily retorted, "What kind of eyes do you have? Her limbs and internal organs are damaged. She's in so much pain, why don't you try faking it?" The two of them exchanged a brief, silent look. I was too exhausted to pay attention to them. I could only lean on the nurse's shoulder and wait for help to arrive. But it didn't take long before the pain became unbearable. James, as though his conscience had suddenly awoken, reluctantly crouched down and reached out to pull me up. "You're so annoying. It's just a small injury. Is it really necessary to make such a scene?" But before his hand could touch me, I slapped it away with all the strength I had. My red eyes locked onto his, filled with boundless hatred. "Get away from me. Don't touch me." Their cruelty had caused me this pain. I didn't need their fake sympathy. James's face turned grim as he cursed under his breath. "Fine, Lara. You've got some guts now. Huh? If you die out there, I won't care." Just as he stood up, a tall figure strode toward us from the distance. He bent down, gently lifting me off the floor. I could smell his pleasant woodsy scent, and in that moment, my restless heart felt soothed. James blocked his path, asking, "Who are you?" The man's voice was low and melodious, carrying a clear authority as he said, "Her fiance, Edward." "Move aside." Both Claude and James froze at the sound of the name. Instinctively, they stepped aside. Edward carried me a few steps away, and I could still hear Claude gritting his teeth behind us. When did she start getting close to someone from the Koo family? TCH. I underestimated her methods. She's really a schemer. It sounded like they were a little wary of my fiancé. That made me more determined to stay with him. Edward and I were not strangers. Since I was 18, Law's father had been subtly creating opportunities for me to interact with Edward, all while keeping it a secret from the Law brothers. At that time, they were still obsessed with me and would never allow me to be alone with other men. So once I realized Law's father's intentions, I began to resist. It had been nearly 2 years since I last saw Edward. He still had the same charm as ever. "Edward, thank you for helping me." I weakly thanked him as I lay in the hospital bed. Edward sat at the edge of my bed, looking at me deeply. After adjusting my blanket, he stood up. "No need to thank me. Rest well. I'll leave now." As he turned to walk away, I stretched out my fingers and lightly touched his hand, gently grasping it. "Can you wait for a moment?" Edward's fingers stiffened slightly. "Sure." He sat back down, patiently watching me. I hesitated before speaking, organizing my words. "We're going to get married, right?" Chapter 5. Edward was silent for a few seconds before nodding. "Yes." Then he quickly added, This is essentially a union of two families. But if you really don't want it, I won't force you. I panicked at the thought of him rejecting me and quickly said, I want to. Of course. I want to. I desperately needed to escape my current situation. And if I had to use a marriage to assert my value, Edward was undoubtedly the best choice. Perhaps my response was too eager, because Edward suddenly looked down and smiled, his tone somewhat surprised. I thought you disliked me. I was confused. Why would you think that? 2 years ago, I thought you had agreed to my invitation. I waited for you for a long time that day, but you didn't show up. There was a hint of unspoken disappointment in his voice. I immediately remembered what he was referring to. 2 years ago, I considered Edward a friend, so when I received his invitation to have dinner alone with him, I eagerly agreed. But that day, James had suddenly fallen ill. He cried and insisted I stay with him, refusing to see a doctor unless I was there. That night, Law's father found me. He told me to be nice to Edward. That was when I first learned the blatant reality of my situation. I realized that I was nothing more than a pawn. I didn't want that. So I began to rebel, to resist, and to try to change my fate. That was why I started avoiding Edward and never saw him again. I didn't expect to have made him misunderstand. I never disliked you. I was just too young and naive back then, thinking I could resist fate. I'm sorry, Edward. I didn't keep my appointment that day. A long overdue apology. Edward gently patted my head, his tone warm. It's okay. I forgive you. I held his hand, my eyes filled with longing. When will we have the wedding? Are you in such a hurry? I want to get married soon. Is that okay? Edward grasped my hand firmly, his palm warm. Okay. During my hospital stay, Edward visited me every day. The day I was discharged, he came to pick me up. He had listened to me when I mentioned wanting a quick wedding. As soon as I was out of the hospital, he had already arranged the engagement party. I wore a pure white dress and had my makeup done delicately. As I walked into the venue, arm in arm with Edward, I immediately spotted the Law brothers and Naomi. Claude and James looked absolutely dreadful. Naomi stood between them, one arm linked with each of them, wearing a puffed-up skirt, looking every bit the princess. Though I was one of the main characters at the engagement party, Edward, fearing I might tire, allowed me to rest aside after a simple walkthrough. Not long after, Claude appeared behind me. He grabbed my arm and forcefully dragged me out of the banquet hall. James waited outside, and the two surrounded me. I tried to push them away. What do you think you're doing? Claude sneered. What's the matter, Lara? You're in such a hurry to get married right after being discharged. Are you afraid you won't find a husband later? You're really that cheap? James fiddled with the hem of my dress, his face mirroring Claude's, both wearing contemptuous smirks. Or did Edward give you something good? Money, a house, or has he slept with you? Chapter 6. The words were filled with malice and venom. I was furious and raised my hand to slap him, but the difference in strength was overwhelming. Before my wrist could even reach him, James tightly grabbed it. He pushed me against the wall, grabbing my chin. He hissed, Lara, you didn't even tell your brothers about the engagement? Have we spoiled you too much? You think you're all grown up now? Huh? I couldn't understand what they were thinking. My engagement has nothing to do with you. Besides, you're not even my real brothers. My life isn't something you can control. As soon as I finished speaking, their expressions darkened. We raised you. What do you mean? It has nothing to do with us? Without our Law family's care, you, an orphan, would have been dead by now. You really think you could survive on your own? Turns out, you're just an ungrateful little wolf. The hand on my chin tightened suddenly, and I couldn't break free. The pain was so intense that tears were threatening to fall. Just then, Naomi walked over. Claude, James, what are you doing? She clutched her stomach and looked pale, feigning distress. I think I ate something bad. My stomach hurts so much. Her voice was soft, sweet, and full of that exaggerated, needy tone. James immediately released his grip on me and hurried toward Naomi with concern. Naomi, what did you eat? Naomi grabbed their hands, complaining about the food here. Any one of our family's aunts could cook better than this. Who hired this terrible chef? The Koo family has no taste. Edward happened to arrive just in time to hear that. He paused for a moment, his smile thin and cold. It's terrible, is it? I heard from the staff that Miss Lynn here ate quite a lot. Like she hadn't eaten in ages. If it was so bad, why eat so much? Is it true the Law family has fallen so far that they can't even afford decent food? Naomi's face instantly turned an ugly shade of both red and blue. The Law brothers immediately grew defensive, jumping to her side. You can't just insult the food. Naomi's health might suffer from it. Are you going to take responsibility? Edward ignored them completely, walking over to me instead. He gently touched the red marks on my chin, his eyes suddenly turning cold. He pulled out his phone and sent a few quick messages. Soon, several bodyguards in uniforms arrived at a swift pace. Edward pulled me closer, his arm around my shoulders, and gave the bodyguards a command: escort these three out. My Koo family doesn't welcome anyone who disrespects my fiance. The bodyguards followed the instructions without hesitation, showing no mercy. When they refused to leave, they were immediately shoved and pushed out of the way. The Law brothers' suits were rumpled. Naomi's skirt was stepped on and covered in dirt. Looking disheveled and filthy, Claude tried to retaliate, but he was no match for the highly trained bodyguards. With one swift move, he was thrown onto the ground. Looking utterly pathetic, he scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with rage. Edward, don't go too far. Lara is my sister. This is her engagement party. If you dare kick us out, I'll take Lara with me. Edward sneered, a cold laugh escaping his nose. Take her? Who do you think you are? Even your father wouldn't dare talk to me like this. And you want to negotiate with me? You should ask yourselves if you're even worthy. Chapter 7. Edward, though young, was already the head of the Koo family, while the Law brothers were just pampered second-generation rich kids, reliant on their father with no real power or influence. They didn't even have the right to compare themselves to Edward. Clearly, they both realized this, and their spirits immediately deflated. However, Naomi, ever oblivious, continued to prattle on. Sis Lara, we're so happy you've found someone you love. We came today to wish you well. You don't like me much, and I'm fine with that. But you can't treat your brothers like this. They've loved you so much, pampering you from childhood. Do you really have the heart to send them away? She even pretended to be on the verge of tears. The Law brothers, while comforting her, glanced at me every so often, and I could see a hint of expectation in their eyes. What were they expecting? I was fed up with Naomi's hypocrisy and their double standards. I turned away in disgust, leaning into Edward's arms. I don't want to see them anymore. Edward wrapped his arm around my waist. Okay. This time, the bodyguards didn't hesitate. They immediately dragged the three of them out. The high society guests at the party were all watching, amused. The Law brothers had utterly embarrassed themselves. James's furious words lingered in the air. Lara, just wait. Edward cupped my ears protectively. Don't worry about them. I'm here. The long-lost feeling of being loved and protected warmed my heart. After the engagement, Edward bought me a house. Finally, I no longer had to return to that cold, unwelcoming home. However, I kept receiving harassing messages from Claude and James. Either they insulted me or threatened me, always implying the same thing: I needed to move back. It was ridiculous. When I was there, they treated me like I was invisible, and now that I was gone, they wanted me to come back. They were completely unreasonable. I ignored them until Claude sent me a photo. If you don't come back tomorrow, I'll burn this. You know I always follow through on my threats. It was an old photo of me as a child with my deceased biological mother. I had almost no memories of her, and the photo was just a sentimental reminder. It wasn't crucial, but I didn't want it destroyed. After some consideration, I decided to return. When the car pulled up to the Law family mansion, I felt an odd sense of unfamiliarity. This was the place I had lived in for over a decade. Yet after only a short time away, it felt strange. Once inside, I saw the Law brothers sitting on the couch. Interestingly, Naomi was absent. The moment they saw me, they immediately adopted their usual sarcastic tone. Oh, look who decided to come back. Living in the Koo house too comfortably. Huh? Almost forgot where your real home is. I didn't listen, didn't respond. I walked straight over to them and held out my hand. Give me the photo. Claude, sitting with one leg crossed over the other, was lazy and indifferent. What photo? I couldn't stand his attitude. Stop pretending. Is this fun for you? Oh, it's very fun, he replied casually. To tell you the truth, I could have given it to you, but now I don't feel like it. I fought back my frustration and refused to argue with them. Instead, I turned and went upstairs to my room. Knowing them, they wouldn't keep something like that on their person. It was probably hidden somewhere out of sight. When I opened the door, I was stunned. The room was filled with gift boxes and plastic containers, some opened, some not, scattered everywhere. On the bed, the carpet, the balcony. What had once been a warm little nest had turned into a chaotic storage room. A sharp pain shot through my chest. These were probably all birthday gifts Naomi had received. My birthday was the day before hers, but that year, I had been in the hospital, and no one remembered. Not even a happy birthday came my way. Chapter 8. I stepped over the scattered mess and searched the room thoroughly, but I couldn't find the photo. The two of them leaned casually against the doorframe, watching me rummage through the room. Whenever I made a bit of noise, they would warn me. Keep it down, Naomi's resting. It took us forever to get her to sleep. If you wake her up, you'll regret it. I had had enough. I threw the box I was holding with force, then walked over and grabbed James by the collar. What do you want from me? James narrowed his eyes. My dear sister, you know what we want. Break off the engagement with Edward and come back to be your spoiled little lady. I couldn't help but laugh. Come back to be bullied by you again? To be ignored? What do you even want from me? Why do you hate me so much, yet refuse to leave me alone? Do we have some deep-seated grudge? And don't you get it? The engagement was pushed by father. His business relies on the Koo family. I'm just his tool. Tools don't get to have personal feelings. And I really like Edward. I won't break off the engagement. By the time I finished that last sentence, their expressions had changed. Claude grabbed my shoulder, his teeth grinding together. Like him? You're telling me you like Edward? You've got to be kidding me. Do you even know what kind of person Edward is? Do you have any idea how many dirty tricks he's used to get to where he is? And you still like him? Lara, you really are both stupid and naive. James was growing impatient. He interrupted, his voice sharp. Why waste time talking to her? If we don't let her leave, do you think she can walk out of here? I took a cautious step back. What do you want from me? What do we want? Of course, we're locking you up so you don't go running off to that Koo guy and embarrass the Law family. James shoved me hard. I staggered backward, and he reached for the door handle, trying to slam the door shut. Just as he was about to close it completely, I managed to wedge my foot between the door and the frame. The force caused my whole foot to throb with pain, but I held back the scream. You want to lock me in? I'm Edward's fiance now. Do you really think you can cross him? Edward this, Edward that, Lara. Don't forget, you're a Law family member. We're your brothers. Don't you ever bring up that bastard again in front of us. Their faces twisted with anger, clearly displeased at the mention of Edward. But so what? I don't have the Law surname. You never treated me like a sister, did you? And you already have Naomi as a sister. Why won't you leave me alone? Are you happy torturing me until I'm broken? I shut my eyes for a moment, suddenly feeling an overwhelming exhaustion. I pushed them away with all my strength, trying to leave, when Claude pulled out the photo from somewhere and shouted, I told you, if you try to leave, I'll burn it. I froze. Slowly turning around, I ran back, snatching the photo from his hand. But the photo had been carelessly kept. It was crumpled, and my mother's face was a blur, unrecognizable. Did it even hold any meaning anymore? A wave of deep sadness swept over me, and as my fingers moved, the already fragile photo was torn into countless tiny shreds. The Law brothers stared, eyes wide in shock, their pupils trembling. They had seen how carefully I had once kept the photo, how much it had meant to me, but now, I had torn it to pieces with my own hands, the fragments scattered across the floor, never to be pieced back together. It's mine. I'll handle it myself. From now on, you have nothing that can threaten me. I turned to leave. They couldn't stop me now. Chapter 9. Suddenly, a scandal about me erupted in high society. Rumors spread that I had been once assaulted by my kidnappers, and that I was no longer pure. People behind my back mocked Edward for picking up a damaged good. At first, I had no idea about this, as Edward had kept it from me. But one day, when he took me out for dinner, one of his business partners bluntly brought it up. "Mr. Koo, with your looks and status, you can have any woman you want. Are you really okay with keeping such a dirty thing by your side? If I were you, I would have kicked her out long ago." The man was drunk, and his words were recklessly unfiltered. And that's when I saw Edward lose his temper like I had never seen before. His face went as cold as ice, and he walked over, kicking the man to the ground, then pinned him there and beat him mercilessly. He showed no mercy, even making the man bleed. I panicked and rushed over to stop him, wrapping my arms around him. "Edward, I'm fine." I grabbed his clenched fist, trying to calm him down. "Don't be angry. It's not like," he said. It took a while, but eventually, Edward's anger subsided. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me close, and publicly declared that he was ending the partnership with that man right then and there. At that moment, the entire place fell into stunned silence. No one dared to provoke Edward again. Afterward, I explained everything to him. "I don't know how people found out about this, but I feel like someone intentionally spread it. It's probably Naomi, the other adopted daughter of the Law family." I shared my suspicions with Edward. He listened patiently, his hand gently brushing the scar on my forehead, a scar that still hadn't faded. His eyes were full of tenderness and concern. "Do you trust me?" I nodded. Of course. I trusted him. He was the only person who cared about me in this world. After I finished speaking, Edward kissed the corner of my mouth, his voice low and hoarse. "Then leave everything to me." Our wedding with Edward proceeded as planned. Everything moved quickly and smoothly, but on the eve of the wedding, the rumors that had been suppressed seemed to resurface. This time even worse, with embellishments that painted me as a truly wretched person. Even Edward's friends couldn't stand it anymore. They approached me, offering me a large sum of money, hoping I would leave on my own and not tarnish Edward's reputation. Naturally, my mood was affected, and I felt down for several days. Meanwhile, the Law brothers came to find me again. It had been a while since I'd seen them, and they looked thinner, their spirits not as high. They blocked my path like a wall. As always, their mouths were as unpleasant as ever. "Wow, so you really plan to marry that Koo guy? Huh? With all those rumors about you, do you really think he won't mind? No man would be fine with this. You know?" I was already frustrated, and seeing them just made me more annoyed. "If you have something to say, spit it out. Otherwise, get lost." Their faces turned sour when they heard my tone. Claude immediately opened his mouth to curse at me, but James stopped him with a gesture. The two exchanged glances. As if scheming something, James finally spoke. "We're not here to argue. We came to propose a deal. We'll help clear up the kidnapping rumors. But in exchange, you have to cancel your wedding with Edward. What do you say?" Chapter 10. They call this a deal? I laughed. "Let me make it clear. It's impossible. I'm definitely marrying Edward." Claude couldn't hold his anger anymore. He glared at me, eyes burning with fury, and his tone was dripping with mockery. "If Edward knew that the pure image you show on the outside is all a facade, and that you secretly hired someone to kidnap your own sister, do you think he'd still like you?" I frowned, not quite understanding what he was saying. Claude took a step forward, disgust written all over his face. "Why are you still pretending? You failed to hurt Naomi, and now you're getting a taste of your own medicine. You deserve all of this. Since the moment Naomi joined the Law family, you've been targeting her. She's so good to you. Even after you hurt her, she still tried to protect you and kept quiet. If we hadn't found out about her injuries, she'd still be suffering." What ridiculous things they were saying. How exactly had Naomi brainwashed them like this? "Lara, you're such a malicious woman. We're trying to help you, and you're still ungrateful. You're truly disgusting." I was speechless. Without thinking, I slapped him across the face with a sharp smack, my palm stinging from the force. I never had Naomi kidnapped, and I've never hurt her. My tone was flat, without any expectation that they would believe me. It was simply a fact. I had long since gotten used to how they would always blindly protect Naomi. So, I felt nothing inside. I just couldn't help but find it all laughable. You believe whatever Naomi tells you. She's playing you like fools. And yet you're so naive, still defending her. It turns out you're the real idiots. Claude, James, you two are pathetic. I almost feel sorry for you. As I turned to leave, they stood there, frozen, as if finally realizing something was off. On the day of the wedding, the atmosphere was lively. Although many people looked down on me, Edward's status was undeniable. His wedding was a grand affair. Those who should be there came. And those who shouldn't, still came, including Naomi. I thought she was here to cause trouble for me. But she wasn't. She was here for Edward. At my wedding, Naomi wore a bright red, seductive mermaid dress, her makeup flawless, her cheeks flushed with pink blush. In the past, she loved wearing this kind of makeup in front of the Law brothers, always trying to appear delicate and lovable. Edward Gitch, my father asked me to deliver your wedding gift, but it's too heavy to carry inside. I left it outside. Can you come with me to get it? At that moment, Edward was crouching down, adjusting the hem of my wedding dress. He glanced at me, then back at Naomi, before getting up and replying, "Okay, I'll go with you to get it." As I watched them leave together, my heart twisted slightly, especially when Naomi gave me a look that seemed half smiling, half mocking, almost as if she was saying, "See, if I want him, I can have any man I desire with just a snap of my fingers." Even though I knew Edward wouldn't be swayed by Naomi, after the past experiences with those two, I couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy. In the makeup room, I waited alone. Soon enough, I saw the figures of two people reflected in the mirror. The Law brothers quickly walked toward me, frowning as they grabbed me by the arm and yanked me up from the chair, their hands tugging at my wedding dress. "You look terrible in that wedding dress. Take it off and come with us." Chapter 11. My forehead throbbed, and I raised my hand to slap him. The long, carefully designed nails I wore for the wedding gown sliced across James's face, leaving a trail of blood. He was furious, his voice low and menacing, each word coming out like a roar. "Law, R.A." I shrugged them off. "What's wrong with you? You come to cause trouble at my wedding?" James struggled to hold back his anger, swallowing his rage. "We know you're being forced to marry Edward. We're here to save you. Take off the wedding dress, and we'll take you abroad. Got it? Save me? From what position are you saving me?" I sneered coldly. Claude yelled at me. "We raised you. Don't forget that. Even if you're inherently vile and unchangeable, not just anyone is worthy of marrying you. Since you were a child, you've stuck to us like a shadow. Even if we raised a dog, we'd have some feelings for it. Lara, the only ones who can bully you are us." His words made my stomach turn. What a righteous speech. They really thought they were the good guys. But there was one truth in their words. Growing up, they were the only ones who ever bullied and hurt me. It wasn't until I left them that I realized the world outside was so much brighter. "Take me abroad." "And what about Naomi?" I asked, without missing a beat. They both looked at me like it was obvious. "Is that a question? She's so fragile. She can't survive without our care." "Of course, we're taking her with us." Claude suddenly pointed at me. "I warn you, just because we're taking you doesn't mean we forgive you. From now on, you must treat Naomi well. All the wrongs you've done to her, you will kneel and apologize. Beg for her forgiveness." Even now, they still thought Naomi was some innocent little lamb. I smiled faintly, shaking my head in disbelief. "I'm not going with you, but there's still a big scene today. You can stay and watch." Just as I finished speaking, a sharp scream echoed down the hallway. I followed the Law brothers outside. We saw Naomi, disheveled, her collar wide open as she ran out of her room and threw herself into their arms, sobbing and crying. Then, Edward emerged from the same room. He was still impeccably dressed, his face unchanged, showing no signs of distress. But the Law brothers, their minds no longer functioning clearly, instinctively assumed that Edward had hurt Naomi. "Edward, I'll kill you." James opened a nearby fire extinguisher cabinet and grabbed the extinguisher, ready to smash it into Edward. Edward sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the blow. I ran over, lifting the heavy hem of my dress, and positioned myself in front of him. James looked at me, disbelief written all over his face, his forehead veins bulging with rage. He just hurt Naomi, and you still dare to protect him. Lara, he's my future husband. If I don't protect him, who should I protect? I took Edward's hand, interlacing our fingers in front of them. Claude's eyes burned with hatred. Lara, we were fools to think we could save you. You, a filthy woman, belong with that rapist. Edward's expression tightened, as though he wanted to stand up for me. I scratched his palm lightly, pulling him back. Say whatever you want, but our wedding is about to start. Chapter 12. As Edward and I had expected, they were bound to cause a scene at our wedding. Just when Edward and I were about to exchange rings, the Law brothers appeared with Naomi in tow. They snatched the microphone from the host's hand. The guests below were all confused, not understanding what was happening. Everyone, the wedding is over. Not long ago, Edward locked my sister Naomi in a room and assaulted her. When we found her, her clothes were torn off. How could this garbage animal still have the face to get married? Today, I must get justice for my sister. His words sent the crowd into an uproar. The well-known Edward, being exposed for his misconduct at the wedding, harassing a woman, it was a scandal beyond belief. Of course, some didn't believe it. What proof do you have? James pulled Naomi out and handed her the microphone. Claude encouraged her. Don't be afraid. Just tell everyone what happened. We've got your back. Naomi's eyes were red, and tears streamed down her face. I don't know why this is happening. Today was supposed to be my sister's wedding. I just came to wish them well, but I didn't expect my brother-in-law to be such a person. He locked me in the room, wouldn't let me leave, tore off my clothes, and kissed my body. I was so scared. As she spoke, she lifted her collar, revealing visible hickeys on her neck and collarbone. Her words were filled with emotion, tears streaming down her face. With her performance, even the most ambiguous video seemed to become real. She sniffled. If you still don't believe me, I have a video. I can show it to you. She opened her phone and played the video. It was only a few seconds long. Edward's face flashed by quickly, followed by her fearful voice. Brother-in-law, what are you going to do? Please, don't do this to me. It was originally a vague video, but with her acting, most of the people believed it. The crowd below started to whisper, pointing fingers at Edward and me. Some people stood up, ready to leave, even trying to make a show of it. I never thought Mr. Koo was such a vulgar person. We won't collaborate with him anymore. How disappointing. They all knew that once this story spread, the stock price of the Koo family would definitely plummet. When the walls fall, everyone rushes to push them down. But they still weren't careful enough. Did they not notice how calm Edward and I were? I glanced at the acting Naomi and smiled faintly. Your video's done. Now, it's our turn. The large screen behind us flashed. There were 2 videos. The first one showed Naomi calling Edward out not long ago. Naomi didn't realize that Edward had arranged for cameras all along the way, including in that room. On the ultra-clear screen, Naomi could be seen opening her own clothes, leaving marks on her neck with her own hands, and then pulling out her phone to film. She was self-directing the entire scene of being assaulted by Edward. Chapter 13. Then she started to threaten Edward. Mr. Koo, do you know what people will think of you if I go out like this? You'll be ruined. Edward, standing a few meters away from her, asked indifferently, what's your purpose? Naomi's face twisted into a sinister smile. My purpose is simple. Cancel the wedding with Lara. Why does she deserve to marry you? Why should she live a good life? Impossible. I want her to live forever in my shadow. Edward narrowed his eyes. What has she done to offend you? Naomi laughed, looking up. Her expression twisted. I just can't stand her. Since I came to the Law family, she's always been the darling, pampered by everyone, but we're both just adopted daughters. So why does she get love while I'm rejected? I hate how fake she is, acting kind to everyone. Does she think I'll be grateful to her? She's no better than me. Everything she has, I want to take away. And if I can't, I'll destroy it. The second video showed Naomi on the phone, giving orders to someone on the other end. I'll bring Lara over tonight. You just wait to ambush her and knock her out. Once you've tied her up, you can do whatever you want to her. It'd be best if you ruin her. Don't worry. I'll give you 500,000 after it's done. The video was chilling. Naomi's sinister demeanor contradicted the sweet, innocent image she usually portrayed. It gave people a chill down their spine. So, this beautiful woman had such a malicious heart. The Law brothers' faces were priceless. All along, they thought I had been bullying Naomi. But today, they finally realized they had misunderstood me. Naomi grabbed their hands in a panic, shaking her head desperately. No, it's not like this. Don't believe her. Don't believe her. But this time, the Law brothers were no longer fooled. Do you think we're blind? Naomi, messing with us like this. You're digging your own grave. They pushed her to the ground together. She was wearing high heels over 10 centimeters tall. The fall caused her to twist her ankle, and the sound of a bone cracking echoed. Ah, Naomi sat on the ground, clutching her foot and crying. But the Law brothers, who had once pampered her, looked at her with no more affection in their eyes. Edward had actually prepared 2 wedding venues. After the Law brothers and Naomi were kicked out, Edward took me to the other venue. It was even more grand and beautiful. Our wedding proceeded smoothly. After the wedding, the Law brothers came to find me multiple times, trying to meet with me. They sent gifts, letters, and promised to apologize and make amends, even recording a video of them kneeling with Durian. But without exception, I threw everything away. I only opened one letter to read. It said they had kicked Naomi out of the Law family and sent her back to the slums, promising to never let her return to the city. They also admitted how badly they had misunderstood me and hoped to return to the way things were, and other useless words. They persisted for 6 months. It wasn't until half a year later that they finally saw me from a distance. But in their rush to approach me, they didn't notice the oncoming traffic, and both were hit by a truck. They didn't die, but both were left with lifelong disabilities. Their lives would never be the same. Meanwhile, my life only got better.